We're live. It is 6:57. I am ahead of schedule, so I'm here before 7. That's all that counts. I like being early for work. That way you can get prepped and get the mental game going so that you're ready to go and ready to get stuff done. And actually, that's what tonight is all about. We're going to talk about getting it running versus getting it right and then getting it running. Because what happens is a lot of times you try to go to all the effort to get it right and get it perfect, and then it never gets running. That's what tonight is about. And really interestingly enough, this is more than just that, because it has to do with a lot of comments that we got about doing the GLHS, because heaven forbid you do something that is different than somebody else does, or you can't do it that way. No, actually you can. There are a couple of really good examples. I'm going to go ahead and get the poll up early so we get a lot of participation in the poll. Let's see. A 175 horsepower GLHS will, let's see, GLHS. Beat a 224 horsepower Spirit. £3,100, 225 horse Spirit RT in the quarter mile. So let's see. So the poll for today is, and I'll go over this a couple of times, will a 2,000 or 2,200 pound Dodge Omni GLHS that makes 175 horsepower beat a 224 horsepower Spirit RT that weighs 3,100 pounds? Which one of those will win? So will the lighter weight car with less power beat the heavier car with more power? So let's see what you guys think about that. But back to my discussion. The discussion is don't get it right, but get it running. And I think Freiberger has kind of made this famous, although that's been thrown about for a long time, I think. But the reason that it applies to the Omni GLHS that just happened out of the car farm, thanks again, Ben and Brian, awesome dudes out there, which continue to do stuff to this day to the car, because we're going to make it right. We already made it run. Now we're going to go back and make it right, because the goal of this, so for people that don't know, because I got comments about this too, no, you should have ported the head and you should put a cam in it and a header and a big turbo and an intercooler and all of this stuff. Yes, and that will all happen on the engine dyno, because then I can test it all and show you guys what it did and show you, more importantly, whether it's worth it or not. Should you port the head? Does it do anything? Does the NA camshaft pick up any power over the turbo camshaft? Is a roller cam better than the slider cam? Yada, 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 all of that stuff. So we'll be doing that on the engine dyno. So people wanted me to do all that to the motor that we put together. And on the surface, actually, that makes a lot of sense. It's just common sense, because if you're going to the trouble of putting it together, then why not put it together, put a little bit of extra effort into it and make it better? But there's two reasons. One, the goal of this build was fairly specific. So what I wanted to do, the goals that were multiple, when I set out to go back to visit the guys at the car farm 2,500 miles away, the goal was bring the car back. The car had no engine or transmission in it, because the 2.5 and the 568 trans came out of it because the motor was broke. So I had the car here at my house, and so the goal was take the car out there, do a 2.2 liter 1987 specific 2.2 liter T2 GLHS, if you will, build that engine, put it in the car, and get it running. That was the goal for taking it out there, and I needed to do that in a reasonable time frame, like week to 10-day kind of thing. I didn't want to stay out there forever, because I didn't want to be bothering those guys for that long. They're brand new friends, and so you don't want to overstay your welcome. And honestly, I don't want to be away from my family for that long. I love my wife and my kids and want to be here with them all the time. So but I wanted to get this done, so I'm conflicted. But that was the primary goal, is go out there, I wanted to, and the other thing is that I needed to go into, a lot of guys wanted me to do modifications to this motor. I just wanted it to be stock, because what I plan on doing is doing this as a swap car. It's an 85 car. I'm putting an 87 upgraded intercooled version, and it needed to be all stock so that it would go through the ref station and be totally stock. Catalytic converter, stock downpipe, exhaust, computer, harness, injectors, turbo, you know, everything is just all stock. That's what I wanted to be. That was my goal. Your goal for you guys out there that are building them can and quite honestly should be different. If you want more power, port the head. By all means, there's definitely going to be power to be had from porting a head. I don't even have to test that, having tested it hundreds of other times on other things. I don't have to test that to tell you that it's definitely going to pick up power. It will pick up more power when the motor is bigger, when you have more camshaft in it, and so when the motor can utilize the airflow, you're going to pick up more power. So that will definitely work. Camshaft, same thing. I honestly think guys have been, and maybe it's been a cost thing, but I think guys have not gone down the route to a better camshaft for these motors that they could have. Some guys may have that I don't know about, but there's more camshafts or better camshaft combinations, I think, available that should be tested, and that I hopefully plan on testing for this test when we run on the engine dyno. Obviously, a bigger one, a 2.5, is going to make more power than a 2.2. So if you're going to build something, first off, I would always start with a 2.5, because the more power, the bigger the displacement you have, more torque you're going to have, the more responsive the turbo is going to be. So that not only do you make more low speed power, you can put a bigger turbo, it'll be more responsive. And then with a bigger turbo, you can make more power, you put more camshaft in it, you know, all of that stuff's kind of snowball. So if you're going to do that, do all of that. And by all means, and hopefully I'll have all the data to show you what things you should be selecting and what things will work and what things you can kind of get away with and what things don't add a little bit of power. Some of them add lots of power. So all of that will be good. But the motor that I put together for the Omni, I just wanted it to be stock. And it would have been really, really difficult for me and certainly expensive to find all of the stock little tidbits for this thing, because I had none of them. So that's what was so awesome about going to see the guys at the car farm, because they probably got 50 cars there that have different things that we could use. You know, these sensors and this downpipe, and, you know, these brackets and harnesses and all of this stuff. So having all that stuff available was just like, it's just amazing. It's like a dream come true going out there when you're wanting to build a turbo 2.2 or 2.5, that they have all of them to choose from. They have everything that we could possibly need there, which was very cool. But because of my specific need, wanting it to be a stock one, we were limited in the things that we could use. So we needed a specific 782 head that had an early head designed for a slider camshaft with oil squirters in it. So that narrows it down a little bit. Like there may be 50 cars out there, but lots of them might be roller cams. Some of them might be bathtub heads. So some of them might be heads that you couldn't use because they're bad. So, you know, that stuff gets narrowed down. But my needs were specific, so we had to gather together all the stuff to make a 1987, even the production date on the block, which was interesting because we found 2 blocks that were within like a week of each other. so they're like brothers or sisters or cousins or some sort of relation for the blocks. But that was my goal for that. So get the stock thing done, and so I was able to do that. And I also had to get the stock thing done in a reasonable amount of time. So a lot of the things that we did, like the Super Ritchie Razor Blade rebuild, when I was there, we couldn't find a motor, disassemble it, send it to the machine shop, wait for the machine shop to do their work, bring it back and do it right. When you build a motor, and if I was building motors for Bonneville, which I have, or any other, you know, the U.S. touring car stuff that we ran, all of the forms of racing, and it was a dedicated build, and I wanted it to work perfectly and make as much power as I could and all that, I know how to do it right. You know, a lot of these comments are like, you can't do it like that. That's the worst advice I've ever heard in my life. You can't tell people that. Well, I know that there's something to be said for doing all the machining perfect and having the rings perfect and having the deck surface perfect and yada, 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 and having MLS gasket and head studs and CA625s. And you could go on and on and on and continually spend time and money and just throw it at this thing until it was perfect. And that it would never get done and it would never go in the car. The other side of that is that and this is the thing that a lot of guys don't realize. And I get spoiled being at West Tech because they have everything there. We have an ASNU machine, or they have one. They have a flow bench, they have dynos, they have all these things that help make life easier when you're trying to test a motor, obviously. But a lot of guys don't have that. So being at the car farm was awesome because it allowed me to go back to my roots and do it the way that lots and lots of guys out there do it. And the thing is, that stuff works, regardless of people telling you, oh, that can't work. Like when we set the injectors up on Ben's car and plugged in the hose and cranked it over. People were complaining about, oh, you're just going to burn the starter out. No, you won't. It's not that bad. I mean, I know the starter gets hot, but it's cranking over a really, really low compression motor. So it's not going to hurt the starter. But their complaint was that you can't just tap on the injectors. You don't know what they flow. You don't know how much that is. You don't have any idea. I know, I don't. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. It actually does. It worked very well. And I can tell you from driving it around that there's no smoke coming out of it, so it's not ultra rich. It's not misfiring, so it's not ultra lean. You know from feel that it's close. It might not be perfect. I would be surprised if it's not. I'd be surprised if what we did to those injectors didn't make them work the way that they work when they were originally from the factory, honestly. So that's the thing, is it can work, and it does work a lot. That method does. Ideally, take them out, flow them, put them in an injector machine, do all the stuff and do it right. Except a lot of guys can't do it right. They can do it this way, and yet it still works. And that's really hard for guys to grasp. They can't. They're like, no, that can't work. Well, you can't say it doesn't ever work, and you can't say that it always works. But somewhere in the middle, there's lots of us guys doing that stuff and making it work. Same thing with the machining. Ben used a stone to hone the cylinders. Now, the way that I look at it is, no, if we took it to a machine shop, we would bore this thing out because it did have a ridge on it. We would bore it out. We would make it straight. We'd make the crosshatch right. We'd get the ring to seal perfectly. The piston to wall would be ideal. That would be the way to do it. And put a forged piston in, put a forged rod, and really get after it. But everything else isn't a step down from that. That's not the way that I look at it. What I look at it is, we have a setup that's probably not going to work. It's probably not going to seal. So we can make it better. I look at it as, here we are, and now we're going to go step up from there. I don't look at okay, we didn't go to the full step all the way to the other end, but we did make it better. Using that stone hone, or I like the ball hone, it works good too, especially on junkyard motors. We just made it better, and it is better. And then so while we had it apart and we were doing that, also I Scotch brighted the cranks because they were, they weren't to my liking. Again, if I took the crank in, I wouldn't have it turned. I would just have it polished. And what we did there was home polishing, basically. So we'll have to see how that works. I'm a little bit worried about oiling and grain and all of that. But that being said, I think it's going to work. And I know that the honing is going to work, because I've done that many times. Now, we also sanded the deck. Again, that's not ideal. You would want it to be perfectly flat and, take a kiss off, take a thousandth or 2,000ths off. And also, if I was doing it, and we will be doing this, but on the motors for the dyno, I would make sure it had the surface finish so that we could use MLS gaskets. Because let's face it, if you're going to try to make a lot of power, you need clamping force, and you need a good gasket. And the gaskets that most of the people put on these things, they'll withstand some stuff, but they're not going to withstand a lot. So I think it wouldn't be unusual to blow these head gaskets, but not an MLS gasket. If you have an MLS gasket on there and you have the surface finish on the block and on the head correct, and you clamp it down with ARP studs, and you blow one of those head gaskets, you lifted the head, or you did some other kind of damage to the thing. It's not a weakness in the design of an MLS head gasket. You detonated, or you did something bad. So that would be better. But again, stock bolt, stock head gasket, these things were apart anyway, so it didn't matter. We had to put something new on it. So we just, we had fairly fine sandpaper. We finded them, and it's not ideal. But again, it's better than it was, because it wasn't going to seal before. Same thing with the head surface. Same thing with the valve job. I got all kinds of guff about the valve job. You can't put the valve in there. You can't spin it with a drill. in this case, I even used a rubber hose. You do that? That doesn't work. You have to go in and you have to have a new seat put in, and you have to cut it, and you've sunk the valve, and the contact area is too big, and all of these things. Like, yeah, I understand. The best way to do it would be start with a brand new head and brand new seats and brand new valves, hopefully oversized on a ported head, on a polished chamber, and all of that. That's great. We were looking at a head that wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to seal. So what I did was, we put it in there, put lapping compound on there, put a drill on it, and all of a sudden now the head definitely will seal. It's not gonna leak after we were done with it. And so it's better than it was, and it obviously went on there, and again, it went on there and it worked. Now I haven't punished it or done anything on the dyno with it, but there's an area in there, the gray area between what's perfect and what will run. And a lot of times, even that stock stuff with bad valves and stuff, a lot of times that will run. It's not ideal, but the ideal thing is way over there. And then what we did is kind of in the middle, maybe to the sketchy end of in the middle, but still that all worked. And guys were coming unglued about that. They don't understand that, look, we know what the right thing to do is. We know how to do it. I've built lots of, record-setting motors. I know how to do that. But you don't always have to do that. Every build isn't like that. Like I could spend like, an unlimited amount of money putting together one of these 2.2s. But for what I'm trying to do on the stock one, all of that is going to work. There are a couple of areas that we're going to change. We have a used flywheel and a used clutch and a used pressure plate. And I'm pretty sure that I didn't get in it enough to know, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to hold, even for stock power, certainly not if we turn it up. So a flywheel is something that I would take in, get with a new one or have it turned. And then what I want is a clutch, a good pressure plate. And I think the guys from the Car Farm are suggesting like a T3 pressure plate. I want something that has enough power that I never have to worry about it. I can still drive it, but I don't have to worry about if we turn it up to 20 pounds or something. And it probably will only do that on the dyno. But if we put E85 in it and turn the boost up and put an open exhaust and put an air to water intercooler on, all that stuff is kind of bolt on stuff. Maybe do a camshaft, because that's, I think, fairly easy swap even in the car. If we do all that stuff, I don't want clutch slippage to ruin the dyno day. So I want enough clutch, even if it's more than we need. I want enough clutch and clamping force and stuff, so that will all work. So that will be redone. The other thing that will have to be redone is, and the engine and trans are coming back out of the car anyways, because Brian wants to redo the K member. The other thing that has to be done is the cable shifts on this are not right. Both the cables are stretched. The cable mounting is not right. So all of that's going to be redone and make it so that anybody that's ever driven any of these stick cars, a GLH, a GLHS, any of these cars that have 5 speeds in them, even at its best, they're not fantastic, but they're a lot better. We can hardly even get it in gear a lot of times when we had got the engine in. But again, the goal was forget about making it absolutely perfect. Although we went way more toward the perfect end of the scale. You saw what happened after after Brian painted the engine compartment. That's when it all went downhill, or actually I should say when it all went uphill, because the Santa Fe Blue just looked amazing. And then after they cleared it, I just didn't want anybody to walk by it and touch it anymore. I'm like, oh, great, here we go. I don't want the engine put in there. I don't want any of the other things bolted back in. I just want it to look like that. Like I just wanted to climb in the engine compartment and just walk around in all the blueness. But that's where it started. And so now everything was really nice. So now before we put the stuff in, we, cleaned and painted stuff and, just to make all of it look nice. And it will. It's going to look amazing when it's all done, because the whole car is going to look like that, which is going to be cool. But he wants to take the K member out and reshoot that. And so, and fix some other things that were going on with it. So the clutch will be fixed and the cables will be fixed and stuff. And so all of that will work out really good. And I think maybe the return hose, the gasket for the return hose might have had a small leak or something. So we want to address little things. But again, all of that was done because we had a time frame and we decided, look, this is going to happen. I'm coming there and we're going to tear into this thing, and a motor's going together. It's getting hooked to a transmission. All of that's going in, and it's going to run. I'm going to drive it before I leave. And so when you make that decision and you decide you're going to get done, which is what I recommend for everybody, you should decide, look, by December or whatever your self-imposed goal is, this and this is going to happen, this kind of thing, whatever it is. I'm going to get the engine in. I'm going to get the engine compartment painted. I'm going to get the transmission hooked to the engine. Whatever thing you decide, make a goal for yourself and decide this is going to happen. And that's what I did. And having decided that, you know, it had to be a stock one and an 87 and yada, yada, yada. The bar kept getting raised. And then just to make things a little spicier, let's break the transmission in the truck on the way there. so that had to be another goal on top of the other goals. Okay, now I need to acquire another 4L60E and you know, get it back in and hope that it all works, and then drive the other more than 2,500 miles, because I went down to see my friend Brian Tooley, Brian Tooley Racing, and visit Ty and the guys down there. And so go down there and then go across the country. The nice thing though is when I was driving home, I didn't have a tow dolly and wasn't towing the Omni. So if anything, it was a little easier on the truck coming back. Although judging by how well it worked, I think that it could have just as easily, you know, pulled the trailer as well. I did bring the old transmission back. I'm going to see if I can take that over, and maybe Oliver and I can tear that thing apart and see the broken, I think it's, what did he say? It's a sun shield or something like that. Sun shell. I think it's a sun shell. Because it didn't have reverse. It had some of the forward gears, made awful noises. And so we'll take it apart and we'll do like an autopsy, which would be kind of a cool video. Also, when take it apart, maybe I can put it back together as a, you know, stage 17 4L60E, so that later on I could put it in, and then I could actually put a cam or something in my truck, or maybe a different motor after this one's had 320,000 miles on. I know it's just getting good, but it would be cool to have one. That one's leaking, and I think it's the little fitting right above the filter, the crossover for the oil passage. I think that gasket's bad, so I need to fix that. But I would like it'd be nice to have like that L33 would be a good one, or something just like even quasi rebuilt would be good. Maybe with a little camshaft in it or something, if I had enough transmission to take that. And then if I ever have to go tow another car or something, I'll have enough transmission and enough motor. But so let's see how our pole is doing. Well, a 2,200 pound, 175 horsepower GLHS Omni beat a 3,100 pound, 224 horsepower Spirit in the quarter mile. So most people, 79%, are picking the lightweight, less power combination than they are the heavier car and the more power combination. I can tell you that also, in addition to making 224 horsepower, that motor, and they're both 2.2 liters, that motor, the T3, the 4-valve version, makes a lot more torque too. It makes 218 foot-pounds compared to 175 foot-pounds for the T2 version, and actually runs less boost, which is interesting. That they should have kept the boost the same, and then it would have been maybe a 250 horsepower motor. That would have been cool. But the Spirit RT it was cool. We got to do a drag race, and I'm going to do a video on that, so that will be awesome. But it looks like most people are picking the lightweight car. I like smaller, lightweight cars, not just, obviously the acceleration is a good part of it, but everything else benefits too. The braking is better, the handling is better, all of that stuff. The one thing I have to say is, in that case, the Omni versus the Spirit, the Omni is very boxy and not terribly aerodynamic. So if you're looking for something to do, like, you know, charging on the big end and roll racing on the freeway, that's probably not a good choice. The Spirit RT will definitely go a lot faster than the Omni will, because when you look at top speed kinds of things, that's aero versus power. And unfortunately for the Omni, the Spirit RT is better in both of those counts. It obviously has a lot more power and it has better aerodynamics. So I think that the Spirit is probably about 10 miles an hour faster than the Omni was, if guys were out doing top speed runs. The Charger would have been better. I don't know how much faster. That'd have been interesting. I never saw any testing to see. The 86 Omni and the 87 Charger, both GLHSs, had the same drivetrain in them. So it'd have been interesting to see which one of those had more top speed, because this Charger was a lot more, you know, swoopier. It's an aerodynamic technical term. So it's a lot swoopier than the Omni was. So it'd be interesting to see how it has to be faster. So it'd be interesting to see how much faster it is. But back on our topic of, and this is why, you know, I set the goals, and the goal was a stock motor. I had a time frame, which is why we did a lot of the do-it-yourself stuff, which, by the way, is way more popular for everybody. When I posted this stuff on Facebook and Instagram stuff, the do-it-yourself stuff like that is, people go nuts for. Oh, here, look, we sent it to a machine shop and measured it and did everything right. People are like, oh, yeah, yawn. We don't care about that. We care about people, you know, hooking up a sprinkler and then lighting it on fire with gasoline or whatever, because they want, you know, the internet wants crazy stuff. So they want to see that stuff, and they want to see it work, and it does. You know, you saw in the video where we were cleaning the injectors, that worked great. You just tap on them, and we've done that even on the ASNU machine. When I have it on, when we're at West Tech, and we put injectors in and are just checking them to see if they even open and close and see if they flow. We've done the tappy tap method. You tap on them, hey, look, that one's alive again. And so sometimes you can do that even before you clean them, and even before you take them out and put them in the cleaner, and you can get flow, and you know, sometimes it even evens them out. I mean, you know, because sometimes the wrecking yards have been sitting for a long time and they get, you know, they get kind of gunked up, but that can cure a lot of stuff. And as you saw in the video, it definitely helped with the stock injectors that we had on the 2.2. So hopefully those will stay working correctly, because they'll be very important both for the chassis dyno testing and ultimately for the emissions compliance. Obviously, you want it to look and have all of the right things on it, but it also has to perform the way that they want it to. It has to have, luckily for me, I'm sure that emissions requirements with a good catalytic converter for a 1987 car are not going to be, it's not going to be very high. The bar is not going to be very high for that kind of thing. So let's see what you guys are doing. Civic Killer Omni. No, what would be better, obviously, than that is to put a K-series Honda in the Omni. That would be really good. A K-series, like a K20 or a K24, and then a 6-speed would be diabolical in that kind of car. Would be good. Why do ball hones have bad reps? I don't know. Some guys, there are definitely ball hone guys and stone hone guys, and I think that they like bicker just like red and blue does, just like Ford and Chevy, just like every, you know, group of people do. But they both work. I've done both of them, and they both definitely work. And especially if you're good at, you know, getting the right crosshatch, because doing your stroke. E85 is interesting, but where can you get a carb made of stainless or titanium? I don't know where you can get that, but they do have E85 carburetors, though. There's an updated hardened input sun shell for it. Yeah, they do have lots of parts for it. So what I need to do is get a 300M input shaft too. Probably not. Ball hones can't correct a taper or out of round problem. Richard, what do you think about a Chrysler Conquest? I am actually a former Conquest owner. I had the slab side, and that's the Conquest is the brother or sister to the Starion, right? I think it is. I've run those, and like the later intercooled version with the big front mount on it, I think that those look cool. Although I have heard reliability things about the motors. I don't have a lot of experience with them because I didn't even get mine running before. Somebody gave it to me, and then I ended up giving it to somebody else. It needs a better clutch, O2 sensor, and injectors and grounds for sure. It doesn't need any of those for the stock motor. Lightweight's where it's at. There's a reason why every sanctioning body weighs cars before and after racing. Yeah, that makes a difference. Do they weigh land speed cars? No. They don't care about what the weight is in a land speed car. They might be concerned that it's too heavy. If it's pushing down into the earth, maybe they would be concerned about that. I feel sort of bad that you had to explain that you know what you're doing. I don't have to explain that. This is for the live feed guys mostly. They know what it's. I mean, most of them know who I am and what I've been doing. Turbo needs to be tougher than stock to address the boost lag plague. There's no boost lag plague. Think about this. People that complain about boost lag on a turbo motor, if they ever drive an NA motor, you have 100% lag. But nobody ever complains about that. Nobody ever says, when is the turbo going to come on? Well, it never comes on. And everybody's okay with that. No, it's NA. It's got instant response. Well, you have an NA motor over here that also has the instant response. Then it has more. Again, so you're looking at it like, you know, we have something, and then now we've made it better. Casey, no, they do not weigh land speed cars. Some of those things are ridiculously heavy. Too bad you don't have the supercharger stuff to swap on to get rid of the lag issue. We have a really small turbo on there, and you put that turbo on a 2.5, and there isn't lag. So an 0506 Kia Sorento 5-speed trans mounts up to a Mitsubishi V6 engine rear-wheel drive. I didn't know that. I don't know anything about either one of those cars. Found a 330 Olds in a neighbor's garage and bought it for $100. Sadly, it was locked up. Number 3 and 4 rusted up bad. So, do you think that it's beyond like stone honing or ball honing, or is it only going to have to be bored? Because sometimes if you get a lot of rust in there, they have to be bored. Avoid Coddington Motorhome. Well, they do race big rigs out there. And I'm just talking about a lot of the cars. It's not unusual for some of those land speed cars to weigh 6,000 or 7,000 pounds because they fill it full of lead. K car is okay, but Laser or Daytona lets you play Porsche 928. Chrysler Maserati TC lets you play Maserati. It lets you pretend you're a Maserati. Is the GLH running full T2 electronics? Yes, it is. Would definitely need to be bored and just steal a crank out of a 350. My cup is always half full. I was talking about when it's like in the salt and get 2 trucks to tow it out. Casey, that's not unusual at all. And they don't sink into the salt so much as they sink into the water that's underneath the salt. There are lots of people, endless people, every time that I've been to Bonneville. A lot of times it's off of the access road that you get, which is paved and it's raised, so it's not underwater until the end. But if it's wet and you're driving out, like we've had to, a lot of times we drive through water, but guys will go off to the side of the access road where sometimes guys go and camp and stuff. And it's like guys that go off the side of the road, when it had been raining and they go into the mud. If you're in a big 4-wheel drive truck and you go, wow, spin all 4 tires and do all that. But lots of guys go out there and they just boom, and they're stuck. So guys get that out of the salt because they get into what looks like salt on top, and then it's mud underneath, and they've buried them all the way up. I mean, it's sometimes tough to get them out. It has high compression heads, but they need work. Brian, I like a little lag. It's a calm before the storm. Anybody that's ever driven, I'm sure probably Dan has driven an old school turbo Porsche when they first came out, even like the 3-liter ones before the intercooler. I don't think that they were smaller than that before. I think the NA, had a 2.7, but even before they put the intercoolers on them, they were like really low compression, and so they were laggy. And then then the turbo came on kind of all of a sudden. But modern stuff, going from the 70s to the 80s to the mid 80s and into the early 90s. The factory Dodge stuff. I drove Brian's 86 GLHS, and it's a lot of fun. My Saturn SL2 1.9 is getting built this week or sent off to the machine shop and getting JE pistons, scat rods, dual intake cams, support and polish, 10 PSI after break-in, E85. That should be a good combination. Old school 930s. Sneak it around the corner, get everything straightened, and say, wow. So, yeah, it's not very fast. It's not very fast on hard throttle and then all of it. Yeah, that's why so many guys had like spun those things. A 944 turbo that sucked. It seemed like it always had boost leaks. Those cars are really good, and I think a 944 with most drivers was probably faster around a track than a lot of the 911 stuff. I know Dan's going to come back and just tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, but it was a much better balanced car. Big turbo gives you time to make sure the wheel is straight and you're ready to be sucked down the low side of the road. I know I was the GLHS that I drove was like stage 2, had bigger injectors and had a stage 2, had an exhaust on it, stage 2 computer, and I think it was like 14 pounds or something, and it felt really good. The 930s for Widowmakers. I like the fact that, because I have a bunch of books on 911s and stuff because I'm fascinated by them. They have an amazing racing history, but I like reading about them. I like reading about their cure for stuff. was adding weight to the bumpers of them. That's fantastic. And then every year, my friend Bernie and I we used to laugh about this all the time. It seemed like every year that you'd read about the new review from Road and Track or Car and Driver or Motor Trend or whatever, you'd read about it, and then the marketing people would be sure to mention the fact that and they have absolutely cured the understeer, and then followed by the snap oversteer that's inherent in a rear engine Porsche design. They've cured that. It's much better balanced and easy to drive. Every year they would say that, and then probably not. How long till the 2.2 1,000 horsepower GT45 run? GT45 won't make 1,000 horsepower, so that'd be hard to do. And I'm not convinced that a 2.2 will do that either. It might, but it would be like 1,000,000 pounds of boost. 14 pounds was a rookie number. You need to bump those numbers up. It's not mine. You just let me take it for a ride. Mine won't be anywhere near that. Mine will be what's the stock GLHS? 9 pounds, and I think that the boost cut is at 14, right? So it's like 9 and 11 that it allows you to have. Drove the early 935. Yeah, that is a cool car. They tried everything to keep the back end behind the car. They not cured until the 993 came out. 5-link rear suspension. Making the 4-wheel drive, I think, helped the Porsche stuff a lot too. You're sawing the wheel. It's not a fault. It's a feature. Yeah, 11 PSI for stock T2 cars. Boost cut at 14.7. So I think that the stage 2 just allowed them to run up to the boost cut, right? And I think that the T3 Spirit RT also had that kind of ECU upgrade as well. I think it was running about 14 pounds. But it wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see that in the lower gears fish tank valves. I know they're the cure for everything. There's no better amount of money that you can spend that gets you more bang for the buck than an aquarium valve on a factory turbo car, assuming that the tune is there. Yeah, Jim. Once you drive a car like that, you'll definitely remember that. That's cool. I remember reading about the Porsches, the turbos that they ran at Le Mans, and them having boost control knobs in the cockpit. That's a terrible idea for having been a driver for some time. Give them the ability to make more power. Did you put an 87 ECU in the car? Yes. If That's a chip away from reasonable 14 pounds and 3-bar and injectors instead of the 20. I won't do that in the car, but we will do that on the engine dyno. GLH stage 2 logic module had a delay from sensing cutout voltage to actually cutting it out. Oh, okay. Maybe learn that the hard way about fuel and exploiting it. Are planning to put the GLH on a chassis down? Yes, I will run it in bone stock trim, because that's one of the things that I wanted to find out is what does this thing make when it's just all stock. Exactly, Dan. Boost knob in the cab. What could possibly go wrong? My knob seems to be broke. I put a pipe wrench on it and kept turning it over, and it won't go anymore. It'll only go to whatever the swung the boost gauge all the way around is. I don't know how much that is. So let's see how our pole is doing. Well, a 2,200-pound, 175 horsepower GLHS beat a 3,100-pound, 224 horsepower Spirit RT in the quarter mile. 77% are saying yes, 23% are saying no. Crank up the boost. Just plant your foot on the floor and turn the boost up and down. Yeah, one of the things I really like about these cars, and I think it's a really cool feature, is that they put timers in them that they would allow the boost to go up from 9 pounds to 11 pounds for 10 seconds. And then I think for every 10 seconds that you're not doing it, then it starts adding that back. And so you can't do it until then, but then afterwards you can do it again. And they're just trying to let you chill out for a little while. And so I like stuff like that. I think that that's a really cool design. I salute the engineers that did that and went to the trouble of doing that, because they could have just made it low all the time. They could have said, hey, look, you get 9 pounds and then that's it. They're like, you know what? It'd be cool. You know what guys really want is it's better than 9 pounds, like 11 pounds. It's really good. And then you know that the engineers were sitting back thinking, okay, so it's gonna be 9 most of the time. It'll be 11 during this period of time, and then it'll go back to 9. What happens when guys put a fish valve on these things? We're going to have to put a boost cut on these things, because otherwise people are just going to be boosting these things to the moon, and we're going to be having to maintenance them or repair them under warranty. So they also had the forethought to put a boost cut on it, which everybody should have in any kind of turbo car. You should have something in case the wastegate line breaks or you hook it up wrong or whatever, so that you can save yourself. And I like the fact that they did that. You guys did that in a week. It took me 2 years to do my Daytona. Well, we had some really, really qualified guys there, and then me. So, and what I lack in 2.2 knowledge, I make up for in enthusiasm and work ethic. So I will work like till forever. So it was like till midnight every night. And those guys have all of the stuff, and then they're like, oh no, you need to put that bracket on first, and the turbo's got to be this around, and you got to do this, and you got this exhaust manifold has this cut out for the turbo. You know, they know all that stuff, and it's like the stuff that if somebody asks me a question about, you know, junkyard LS motors, I'm like, oh yeah, you got to do this or this or this, whatever the question is, and they know all that, and so having that information is a lot quicker and more effective than me doing it and trying to learn that information, because after you put all that stuff together, you're like, oh, yeah, that can't go in now. Now I got to take all that stuff off. I'm not saying that didn't happen, but it's much better to have somebody there that knows what they're doing. Gary D had 440 horsepower at 30 PSI. 440 flywheel horsepower at 30 PSI. Any plans for a fish valve on the GLH? Richard lacks a 2.2 knowledge, makes up for in Scotch Brite Craig polishing. I am the polisher. And engineers wanted to retorque of the head bolts after a heat cycle, said it would have allowed several more pounds stock. The counter said no. So that but the average guys could do that, right? I mean, the owner could do that. Boost knobs work great for retarding boost. the boost knob doesn't even have a negative sign on it. It doesn't go that direction. It only goes to the more boost direction. Might do as much as 12 psi on SL2 with 10-to-1 compression, E85, mild deshrouding. It should certainly take that as long as you have an intercooler and E85 and the timing is right. 12 psi I don't think is going to be a problem at all on that. Wheel horsepower, and you blew it up. 30 pounds would be 3 times 440 at the tires. That's 440 divided by 3. 146. Did you see Calvin's last video? He had 840 horsepower at the tire. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think it got hurt though, right? Yeah, you do want it reliable. I would much rather have 10 pounds and have it be reliable than 15 pounds and have it not be reliable. BW, I retorque head studs after a heat cycle. I think most of it do these days. That's good information. I never do that on LS motors. Owners can generally return a head built, okay, but not generally remap the boost allowed tables to take advantage of it. 355 or 375 for a T5 Fox. That's not going to depend on your transmission. That's going to depend a lot on your camshaft and what you're trying to do with it. So how high do you want to rev the thing? It'll accelerate better with 373s, but not if you have a stock 5.0 EFI intake manifold on it and a stock cam and all that stuff. I mean, it might still do that, but you're only talking about, you should be shifting that motor probably at 5,500 RPM though. If you got something that will rev a little bit more, then the gearing will definitely help you. Peter, different question. Just ask the new question. Ranza, is the Ford 2.3 liter turbo about the same size as a 2.5 Chrysler turbo? Somebody, Brian or one of the guys might be able to answer that. They're both T3 based, so they're probably similar in size, I would think. And judging by how much power we've gotten out of both of them, I think that they would be comparable. Because I've done testing with lots of the stock SVO turbos, and the T-Bird ones and Mercurs and stuff. So we run a lot of those. We ran them on an SVO Mustang with Dave from Tiny Avengers. So we did a bunch of testing on his car, but I also ran a few of those with different AR housings on my Honda, my B16 Honda, and they work really well on that. And they make obviously a lot more power on the 4-valve twin cam B series Honda than they do on the even bigger SVO motor. Ford's a little bigger compressor. Turbine wheel is the same. I just pulled one apart last week, which had the compressor wheel. Not sure about all of them. I know that we tested, when I did it, we tested a 48, a 63, and an 82 housing, which one of those was weird and hard to get. The 2.5's got some tiny Mitsubishi turbos. That's odd that they would, on the bigger motor, that they would use the smaller turbo. You'd think it'd be the other way around. So Jay, you think that so let's do it. Jay thinks that the Spirit RT should win just because of power to weight. So 30 divided by 224. Need some light. 3.72. So 2,200 divided by 175. 12.57. So 13.83 pounds per horsepower for the T3 and 12.57 for the GLHS. Butcher Baker. They were catering to the to lag the winders on the 2.5. Sorry, I'm super late. Just have a quick question. Are you going to be running your car at stock boost? Yeah, the T2 motor, the 2.2 T2 will be all stock. Do you have the ability to turn it up? Yes, we would have the ability to turn it up. We're going old school with a G valve, like the Granger stuff. I have one of those that came off of the 2.5, so we would have the ability to do that. Peter, small block Chevy with a 454, 480 cam. The duration would help me more than the lift does. 182 Whine blower, 1.6 rockers on exhaust, and 1.5 on the intake. Okay. Why did someone do this? What advantage, disadvantage does this head-up have? The putting the rockers on is going to do very little. It might do something with that small of a camshaft. I need to know what the duration is on that camshaft. And honestly, if I was going to do that, I would put, I know that they're trying to favor the exhaust, but it looks like that already has a dual pattern camshaft. They're trying to favor the exhaust. I would put 1.6s on both if you were going to do it. There's no lag on your 2.2 or 2.5 at the Mitsubishi. And all of it makes 220 horsepower and 350 foot-pounds. That's a lot. Are all T3 turbos the same? No. I will need a turbo for 1915cc VW with a T3. There's about a bajillion. Yeah, that's a lot. About a bajillion different T3 configurations that you can run. That's just a size. That's just the exhaust. Basically, the size of the exhaust pattern on the exhaust housing. Might have had 1.6s on all and broke one. Only had 1.5s. That could be a repair thing. That would be fine. The Spirit RT is a stick. They were both manuals. I heard Turbo Dave's Auto Trans 2.5 Mitsubishi Turbo Mini would run down the interstate at 4 to 5 pounds cruising. Why would it have boost under cruise? That would be unusual. So everybody's throwing out there that the Spirit RT they were all manual transmissions. Populist, you've never heard of a bajillion, but it's BA. It's not BU. You got to get the spelling right if you're going to do it. I don't know how it spells. 175 horse GLHS will gap the Spirit by half a second in the quarter mile. Wow, now we're getting oddly specific. The Spirit RT is cool. The engine looks great. I mean, it obviously looks as good or better than the GLH does. Scott's out of here. My heavy 89 LeBaron GTC 2.5 turbo did 75 miles an hour with 15 PSI vacuum, only need to boost over 100. So 15 inches of vacuum, right? Maserati TC 8-valve T2 engine. Oh, so it had the automatic. That's right. It didn't have the T3 or the Maserati version of that. Not going faster than 72 miles an hour with being in boost all the time. I've driven lots and lots of turbo cars, like the Turbo Sprint that I have is a perfect example. And when you're cruising at 65 miles an hour or whatever, it's definitely in vacuum. And the more vacuum you're in, the better mileage you're getting. Maserati is definitely heavy. And I showed the pistons in the first video that I did when I arrived at the farm. We went through T1, T2, T3, T4, and then the Maserati version. The Maserati piston is really odd looking. And it's would not be my choice of all of those motors. Maybe the head's good, but Dan, do you have a draggy test for this? No, I don't. I'm just asking opinions. I do have a video coming up where we drag raced 2 of these, but they weren't stock ones. I have had people tell me that all kinds of, you get in comments and stuff, people telling me all kinds of weird stories about, speeds that they were running, how they beat Mustangs and stuff, and these little turbo cars. I'm like, they would definitely accelerate fairly well. But again, when you start getting up into the higher speeds, just like with the Spirit and the GLHS, when you get into the higher speeds, it's the car that has more power, even if it has more weight, definitely has an advantage. Jay, I'm not familiar with different oil pumps for that. I hopefully when you got it rebuilt that you put oil in the pump before you put the pump on, because that's kind of critical. It's funny how little people know about these motors. I have a 1990 2.5. I took off the Mitsubishi turbo, found a Garrett, intercooled it, and springs, and it's a great car. Guys with TCs, do you wish you had the V6 instead of the turbo? Probably not. The TC, especially if you have what was he telling me the VIN code was? An R or a G or something like that. So you want the Maserati that has the stick and the 16-valve Maserati turbo motor, and not just the T2 version. So let's see how our pole is doing. Well, like 2,200 pound, 175 horse GLHS beat up on 3,100 pound, 224 horsepower Spirit RT. 76 are saying yes. K Daly, the TC needs a 2.5 Garrett or the double overhead cam. I think it would have been good if they would have made that made the Maserati version a 2.5 instead of a 2.2. I think that would have been smart for those heavier cars. It's hard even for a turbo car to. I know that when you read about the history of the 2.2s, they were touting the fact that the turbo versions were making more than the V6s, but the V6s got better and started making, a bigger motor. It's pretty easy for them to make more power. The VIN code is R. Okay, that's right. If you're going to switch to a 16-valve head, just go with an SRT4. Yeah, people have been asking me to do that too, and I'm like, nah, pass on that. They had a couple of Maserati motors, I think, at the farm. I don't think I saw any cars there. Vermont calculators like the 2,200 pound car, 175 horse at 1350. 1350 would be pretty sporty. They didn't run anywhere near that stock. What I can't fathom is how the TCs have shorter wheelbase than the lasers. If you look into research what they actually did to those Maseratis after they shipped them over, they did a lot of work to them. It wasn't just the motor. In Precious Pen's here. Am I late? No, you're just in time. You have about 2 more minutes. Scotch-Brite uses aluminum oxide. Of stage 2 SRT4 that put down almost 350 horsepower at the wheels. The guys at the car farm have a few SRT4s there. One of their sons has one that's supposed to make a lot of power. He was there tuning it. I didn't take a ride in it. I probably should have. That would have been cool. But yeah, those definitely are going to be, that's an evolution, and it's a 4-valve motor, and it, that you can make a lot of power with those. Big front mounts on them and stuff. Spirit is just as fast as my stock 09 335. My Spirit's guided and modified. What's the 335 rated at? What was in 09? What was the factory rating? Was it 300 or something like that? Yeah, I've seen guys throw some pretty good money at the neons, but it's like anything. 5-liter Mustangs are the same thing. After you throw on mass air meter, underdrive pulleys, remove the air sensor, which costs nothing, put a K&N in it, or some sort of air intake, a cold air intake on it. Underdrive pulleys, shorty headers, catback exhaust, gears, a clutch quadrant. They made so many things for it that you just would like whatever the new thing is for the week. You would just get that new thing. It can be pricey, but then you have a list of all the things. Oh, mine's got this and this and this and this and this, and it runs 1450s. They did that stock. Yeah, I know. That's cool. When is the visor at 2.2 head coming in? I don't know. I'm not in charge of that. Oh, Dan, you already told us that your Porsche was a budget Porsche build. So that's not like Porsche money. It's a budget one. So we'll end our poll at 75% saying yes, that the smaller car with less horsepower will beat the bigger car with more horsepower. 75 to 25. Butcher. Oh, so 300 horsepower on the twin turbo BMW. Okay. They run 1350s. They make good torque too, because they have small turbos on those, right? That are very spooly. Did they ever make a Porsche-powered boat? I don't know. Maybe Dan can answer that. I would imagine that they did. I know that they made Porsche-powered planes. Populous got some carbon fiber going on there. That's good. Keep the weight down. That's one thing I did like about the Sprint. It was, I think it was about 1,700. But it only had 70 horsepower. Well, it did until we did some stuff. Yeah, I've seen the Lamborghini powered boats. Those are cool. I really like the Cheetah, the Lamborghini, or the LM002. Is that what it was? The Lamborghini powered off-road vehicle that they tried to get the military contract that they eventually gave to Hummer, because they're like, we can't have these guys driving V12. It was originally the Cheetah, but we can't have these guys driving V12 powered off-road vehicles out in the sand and stuff. Yeah, they did look like Hummers. Okay, 2 minutes, guys. I heard the 2.2, 2.5, and 2.0 and 2.4 are really Mitsubishi engines. Yeah, that's Car Farm. They are. No, you got to say that not Mitsubishi engines. You got to say that they're Volkswagen engines. That's what everyone's saying. Mitsubishi. Car Farm Dude. That's Ben. Ben, how much power does the somebody had a neon there that was modified? How much was that neon making? RPF 1s are the way to go. So is that the 15 by 7s too? Okay. I'm trying to remember the wheels that I had on my my Honda on the Del Sol when we were road racing it. They were 15.7s or 15.7.5s. And they were probably, I need to go back and look. I'll need to see what they are. I'll know tomorrow, and we could figure out what they were. They were really, really light. Do you ever do anything with a 2-liter TSI VW? I've done some testing on the chassis dyno with the 1.8 Ts, but not the 2-liter one. You want to stick with a single turbo? They're real small, but really good platforms with the 500 horsepower until big mods are needed. I've seen lots of BMW modified versions of those. Those are cool. I like those motors. I'd like to do something with them. I wish if I had a configuration to set it up and run it really quickly, that would be kind of cool, because I see a lot of BMW motors in the wrecking yards. The 2-liter is direct injected. Yeah, that would be a lot more problematic to run. K Daly, I have read about that head, but I've never seen one in person though. Four-valve head, maximum performance. Not run any BMW V10s. The Wraith used a Cosworth head, not the Hans Hermann head. Uh-oh, we got some conflicting results here. That's who it was, Nick's. Nick's SRT has some sort of Dyno race engine. I think he coasted into 12s. Okay, so it makes good power. I think he was running. I think he said that the spring was 20 or 25 pounds or something, and he was trying to go down from there. Okay, guys, it's that time. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will obviously be back tomorrow. And what video am I working on now? I'm gonna do either the truck transmission install, which was kind of cool, or the drag race video between the SRT, the Spirit RT versus, I'm thinking SRT4, the Spirit RT versus the GLHS. And both of them were modified, so they were driven by our car farmers, which was awesome. So I got a good video of that. Although, Ben, if you're still there, I think I may have lost my jump drive. Maybe at Brian Tooley, but I can't find it. So it has the stuff that you gave me on it. So I may need to talk to you about getting that. So that would be cool. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow. And there's so many ends.